St. Ignatius and His Teachings by Dylan Farley, Anthony Patak, Nicholas Franz, and Javon Roberts.
So first, we have a couple of facts about St. Ignatius. First, he was born October 23rd, 1491 in Spain. He would later die July 31st, 1556, at the age of 64. He was born the youngest son of a noble and wealthy family. And as a young man, he grew up wanting to be a rich and famous military leader. He also had ambitions of becoming a knight and gaining fame through military conquest. Early on in his life, he was also desperate for a life at court. During the Battle of Pamplona against the French, Ignatius was shot in the leg with a cannonball. It was during his recovery where he began to realize the fault in his own ways. He also read 2 books during his recovery about Jesus and the saints, which first gave him the interest of becoming saintly and following God. This conversion didn't happen overnight, however, and he was still so obsessed with life at court that even after his leg fully healed, he asked the doctors to remove a protruding bone, which made his leg look deformed. This caused a longer and more painful recovery. Even during his recovery, however, Ignatius was still so obsessed with earthly pleasures that he states in his autobiography that he spent 3 to 4 hours per day thinking about it. He was later declared a saint by Pope Gregory XV on March 12, 1622. Some more facts about him. Ignatius was said to be a bit of a hothead and once even considered killing a man over a disagreement about the virginity of Mary. In this story, St. Ignatius ends up not killing the man because he lets his horse decide whether or not to pursue the man. In his autobiography, he said it was God who led the horse to the metaphorical high road, which prevented Ignatius from killing the man. Ignatius later founded the Society of Jesus in 1534, and he wrote the spiritual exercises during his time in Manresa, which is still used by Jesuits today. Lastly, here's a quick timeline of Ignatius' journey after his rehab. First, after traveling around Europe, he would become an ordained priest in 1537. Then later in Rome in 1539, he and 9 companions, including St. Francis Xavier, drew up a first sketch of the religious order devoted to the apostolic service anywhere in the world by means of preaching and any other ministry that would later become the Jesuits. Then in 1540, Pope Paul III approved this new order and its title, the Society of Jesus, which is still active today.
So the question that I answered is, did Ignatius's life animate Jesus's main teachings? And did this person lead others to follow Jesus? If so, how? And my response is, Ignatius's early life did not reflect Jesus's main teachings at all. St. Ignatius wished to live a life of court and fame, as well as being a successful soldier in the army. St. Ignatius only focused on himself and his appearance, as he wanted to be viewed as perfect with no flaws. In his eyes, these traits would make him the perfect leader, as he would have no weaknesses. St. Ignatius did not follow Jesus until he went through a major change in his life after an accident in war. St. Ignatius was injured in the Battle of Pamplona when a cannonball ricocheted off a wall and shattered his right leg. He did not know what to do, as he would now walk with a limp, which is an imperfection, so he had the doctor shave part of his bone so that his legs would be equal in length. He was in a hospital when he found God, as there were no other books for him to read other than the life of the saints and the life of Jesus. And in the photo to the right, you can see St. Ignatius in his suit of armor as a soldier. Next slide. He then thought to himself, if St. Francis can do this, so can I. And if St. Dominic can do this, so can I. He then sought out to live a life of poverty and humbleness. St. Ignatius was motivated by the saints, however, not in a way where he praised them, but in a way where he compared himself to them in order to be more and more like the saints. In the photo to the right, you see a photo of St. Ignatius and St. Francis. And next slide. And then one of the primary lessons that St. Ignatius teaches us is to question whether our actions follow the will of God. He created the examen and spiritual exercises to encourage daily reflection and to consider how we positively or negatively affected others throughout the day. In the photo to the right, you see, what do you really want? Which is a main question he would ask others when he went to go preach to them, is to try and find your true life meaning and what you want in life. Next slide. And one of St. Ignatius' moral teachings was focuses on leading by example. He went from thinking leadership was all about being perfect and that people should follow you because you are powerful to Jesus' model. of leadership, which is more about serving people in need and being a man for others. St. Ignatius then lived a life of poverty and humbleness, preaching the word of God. He showed he had commonalities with people instead of trying to show everyone he was perfect. In the photo to the right, you see love ought to show itself in deeds more than in words, which is kind of goes with the old saying of your actions speak a lot louder than words. So put your words into actions. Next slide. And the final lesson that I take away from St. Ignatius when he fully gave himself to following the teachings of Jesus is the absolute meaning of faith. This is basically where one gives everything of themselves and devotes themselves full without expecting anything in return. And further right, you also see a drawing of St. Ignatius of Loyola saying, teach us to give and not to count the cost. So to fully immerse ourselves in our faith and to kind of give willingly without expecting any repercussions or any payment back.
What can we learn from this image? In this image, there is a story with a great moral lesson. This image represents the disagreement Ignatius and the Saracen got into. The Saracen claimed that the Virgin Mary did not remain a virgin after she gave birth to Jesus. Ignatius became so outraged that he thought about killing him. Ignatius wanted to let the will of God decide what he should do. Therefore, Ignatius let his horse choose where to go. Ignatius's horse chose to take the high road. This story serves us a great lesson, which is to take the high road. What is the moral lesson from the image? The predicament St. Ignatius got into with the Saracen serves us a great lesson, which is to take the high road. Taking the high road can really show a lot about a person. It shows if you are a weak-minded person and let the devil get the greater good of you.
If Jesus taught to give up the sword, and if Ignatius eventually gave up the sword, shouldn't young Catholic men abstain from an enthusiasm for weapons? Young Catholic men should abstain from the enthusiasm for weapons because it is wrong to become enthusiastic for something that will cause harm to those around us. But this does not mean that Catholics should not use weapons. Weapons were built for the use of protection and hunting. As long as a human being has the right intentions for using a weapon, then it is fine. But the second someone takes a weapon and tries to inflict pain on another is when the use of a weapon becomes wrong. Weapons also can give the person handling them a sense of power or strength. Once you begin to feel the power of a weapon is when people begin to use weapons in the wrong way. If Catholic men use weapons in an appropriate and respectful manner, then it is fine to use them. But it is wrong to become enthusiastic to harm someone. Next slide, please. And then, I decided to add some teachings for some Ignatius' teaching. I'm just going to read off a few because they're really beautiful to me. I think about them daily. Christianity is not a matter of persuading people of particular ideas, but of inviting them to share in the greatness of Christ. So pray that I may never fall into the trap of impressing people with clever speech, but instead I may learn to speak with humility, desiring only to impress people with Christ himself. This is beautiful for me because, I love Christ, and, at the end it says Christ there. I also think it's beautiful because you shouldn't be trying to impress anyone except for Jesus, because Jesus is all powerful. This other teaching we have here, it says we must speak to God as a friend speaks to his friend, servant to his master, now asking some favor, now acknowledging our faults and communicating to him. All that concerns us, our thoughts, our fears, our projects, our desires, and all things seeking his counsel. Now, this is beautiful. We should always be thinking about Jesus. Bring our problems to him, communicate with him when we're happy, sad.
I like that. I'm glad you added them in.
Thank you for watching our presentation. Once again, group is myself, Dylan Farr, Nicholas Franz, Javon Roberts.
Ron
and
Roberts
Anthony.
here. Thank you, Mr. Dahlman, for a great opportunity to
Yes,
present
Mr.
this
Dahlman.
project. It's gorgeous.